On this episode of the ASC Podcast with John Goehle, we discuss the latest news and information, including extreme heat shutting down elective surgery at an Illinois surgery center, a federal court ruling against the Leapfrog Group, and Leapfrog's plan to publicly rate nearly 4,000 ASCs later this month, recent drug recalls, and the new Section 504 accessibility requirements. We also cover recent events, including electronic medical record formats, door locks into pre-op, and flammable liquid storage. In our focus segment, we discuss pharmacy management and recalls in the ASC.
Welcome to the ASC Podcast with John Goehle, the longest-running podcast specifically focused on the freestanding ambulatory surgery industry. We would like to thank our sponsors, Surgical Information Systems, providing cutting-edge information solutions for surgery providers, RFX Solutions, your all-in-one healthcare regulatory compliance software, MedServe, which is the only digital narcotic cabinet specifically designed and priced for surgery centers, helping standardize processes, compliance, eliminate paper logs and prevent drug diversion, and Ambulatory Healthcare Strategies, the nation's leading regulatory and accreditation compliance resource for ambulatory surgery centers. For more information about our sponsors, please visit our website at ascpodcast.com.
Welcome to episode 283 of the ASC Podcast with John Goehle. We're recording today, July 11th, 2026, from our studios in Spencerport, New York. I'm Sue Cronka, your co-host and operations manager at Ambulatory Healthcare Strategies. As always, the regulatory environment for ambulatory surgery centers continues to shift and evolve. The information we share in this episode is current as of the time of recording, but we encourage all ASCs to stay alert and monitor for any new or updated guidance from the relevant regulatory agencies. Joining me today is John Goehle, owner of Ambulatory Healthcare Strategies, ASC Central, and the ASC Podcast with John Goehle. Together, these three brands provide ASC leaders with the education, resources, and practical tools that they need to thrive in today's complex, highly regulated ASC industry. With more than 3 decades of hands-on experience, John is a sought-after speaker and a trusted expert on topics including regulation, accreditation, and financial management.
So it is good to be back with everybody. Sue is keeping me on the road. It's not totally your fault, I guess.
No, it isn't.
But, and then Sue, I was laughing. I don't think I quite understood that I was going to Denver this past week, and I'm going to Denver again next week. You know, had we really planned that well, we might have been able to have a nice vacation up in the mountains, but I'm looking forward to it. So I just came back from the ASC News, Investments, and Operations Conference, which was at the Grand Hyatt outside of Denver. And, you know, it was a really good event. It's the second year that they've done this, and I was not there last year. And of course, Sue, you used quite a bit of the ASC News articles. They really are great writers there. I got to meet actually all the writers that you're quoting all the time and thanking them for their great content. So I do encourage our listeners to, I think you subscribe to that, a newsletter, and I think you get news at least once a week from them, and I think it's well worth it. But of course, you know, we try to summarize the best articles here. It was a different kind of conference than the ones I usually go to, you know, mainly the state association meetings. And this one really aimed at the C-suite and the investors. So there was a lot of talk about mergers and acquisitions, about technology, about reimbursement and payer strategy. And they've got the whole agenda posted on their website. Hopefully it's still up there now if you want to take a look at it and kind of, you know, plan out whether you want to go next year. We'll put a link to that in the show notes if you want to see what was covered.
Okay, and you were actually on the program.
I was on a panel called Winning the ASC Talent War, which, by the way, is a topic I know well, but I'm not often asked to speak about. So it was quite a bit of fun, actually. And I was up there with my friend Nylene Flores from Elevate Solutions. And a gentleman I've never met before, but he was great to work with, Sean Gibson, and he's with Remedy Surgery Centers. And it was funny because it was the last session of the day, which is always a little bit of a challenge, trying to keep people up. People are leaving in the middle of the session. But we had a good crowd, and the topic is one that every single person listening to this is living through right now. And we're all fighting over the same limited pool of nurses and techs and administrators, and the hospitals and the health systems are fighting for these exact same people. We spent a lot of time on how do we in the surgery center industry stand out? How do you build a culture that actually keeps people, because you're not going to win that fight on salary alone. And that was actually quite a bit of the topic, is how do we create a culture that people want to stay with? And it's just, if we're fighting on salary, it's just not a fight that we're going to win. The hospitals have deep pockets and a lot more money.
Yeah, and that's something we've talked about before, too, because you've got to have something different if you want to win people over, too. And so next you're going back to Denver. You're going to go to Golden, Colorado, right?
Yes, our favorite place, because, of course, we raise golden retrievers, and Golden, Colorado is where the annual Golden Retriever event is. We don't know much about it. Someday we'll get there. And it's just west of Denver on the 16th and the 17th of this week. I'll be going there. So I'm going to be out there recording a number of interviews. This is the second year that we've done that. So we had some incredible interviews last time. And one of the neat things about Colorado and Oregon, which is that they let me interview people that are attending the conference, or I should say they coerce people that are attending the conference to encourage, to speak. And that's always a great way to kind of get the voice of the attendee there. And so I'm hoping to get a couple good interviews in this time. It's going to be a tight time frame, unfortunately. Yeah. So we're going to do a special episode from that meeting. I'm making sure I pack up the right equipment to be able to do this right. I do apologize to our listeners. We use a portable unit. And I know, Sue, you do the editing. Sometimes it's a little bit of a challenge because of the background noise. I'll be taking a little bit more advanced equipment because they give me a really nice space when I'm at both Oregon and Colorado, which are run by the same company.
Yep, and you have 2 books coming out.
I do. Very excited about this, and you need to take some credit for this, too. You helped with the survey guide, getting some of the resource materials together, and you're doing the editing of it, which is no small process, as you have pointed out to me. It's easy enough for me to write it, but I can't edit my own work. I have a hard time, really, looking at the structure of things. So you've done a great job. We're hoping to get the 2026 edition of the survey guide for ASCs, which has been fully updated. We've really kind of reformatted the whole book. We've taken a lot of advice from our readers, and instead of just kind of repeating what's in the actual conditions for coverage and interpreted guidelines, we've added a lot more of our content. In other words,
kind of explaining it a bit more, just trying, giving little tips and everything. I think it's going to be really, really helpful.
Yeah, and something that we're doing with all of our books now, I'm not sure how this is going to go over, but there's a little quiz at the back. Well, it's not a little quiz. I think there's 75 questions here with the answers for it. So it's a good way to kind of, test your knowledge or what you read there. Though I suspect most people are not going to read the book from front to back, at least not without having quite a number of naps in between. But I'm very excited about the book. I've shown it to a couple of our clients, and they really like the new format there too. So we'll get that out hopefully by the end of the month. And at the same time, probably a little bit later than that, the second edition of the Governance for ASCs is coming out. And that's a smaller book. I think it's coming in at a little over 100 pages. I think that's about the size it was. I think it was last published in 2015. Again, really reformatted it quite a bit. Actually made it look a lot prettier, too. And that's one of the nice things is using AI, you can make the pages look a lot more interesting than if you're just using Microsoft Word. So I really took advantage of some of the new tools that we have out there. So I think it'll look attractive, a little bit easier to read, obviously, when you're doing that. So I'll let everybody know right here on the show when it actually goes live, and we'll of course put some links into the books when they're available. So Sue, what news do we have this week?
So the first one that I wanted to summarize is an article from July 6th in Becker's ASC by Patsy Newitt. Carle Health had to temporarily halt elective surgical procedures at its ambulatory surgery center in Champaign, Illinois, after extreme heat and humidity impacted the facility's cooling system on July 1st. The elective cases that were scheduled for the afternoon of July 1st and for the following day had to be rescheduled. The facility took immediate steps to resolve the cooling system issue, and they resumed normal operations after the holiday weekend. But that's just something really important to be paying attention to. Everybody seems to be having extreme weather right now.
So we've been getting calls from our clients about temperature and humidity really getting out of control. And, of course, the two of them are related. Humidity is a little bit more of a concern because of the potential damage to our supplies. Heat is obviously important also, but the balance between the two really keeps everything within the proper parameters. The story that you just repeated is one of those that I think a lot of people are going to read and just kind of skip right past it because it sounds like the facility's problem. And it isn't. It is a compliance problem, and here's why. Your operating rooms and your sterile processing area have to hold specific temperature and humidity ranges based upon the instructions for use for your equipment and your supplies. And that's not about comfort. That's about infection control, and it's about your equipment. And when the humidity climbs, you've got sterility problems with your packaged instruments and your sterile storage. When the temperature climbs, you've got equipment operating outside the parameters that they were designed for, as specified in their instructions for use. And that's something that surveyors are always going to want to look at to make sure that you're staying on top of whatever the instructions for use say with regard to those proper ranges. So the minute your HVAC system can't hold those ranges, you really are not in a position to operate safely, and the right answer is the one that this surgery center took, which is to stop. And I do want to point out, too, is that there's some misconception that the proper range is 20% to 60%.
Yeah.
And that came out of some documentation probably about a decade ago that was later adjusted. Because the issue comes that most equipment, if you look at the instructions for use and many of the supplies that are out there, actually specify the range has to be between 30 and 60%, sometimes higher than 60%, but you need to look at that. And I, as a surveyor, if I come in and see that your humidity, and this is during the wintertime, we're really talking about high humidity right now, but the low humidity ranges, can also be a significant problem too. So if you are using that 20 to 60%, you better make sure that all of your IFUs allow your equipment to operate within that range. So again, I give this surgery center a lot of credit for that. We've had to do it with some of our surgery centers. It's a very hard call to make. You've got a full schedule. You've got surgeons standing there. They're not very happy about having to cancel cases. You've got patients who have been NPO since midnight. If you're a GI center, people have done more than just been NPO, and that's a hard call. So that's exactly why you decide in advance and not in the moment. You have protocols in place so that you know exactly when you're going to do that, and everybody's forewarned up front. So here's what I ask everyone to do after listening to this episode. Make sure your center does have a written procedure that says at what temperature and what humidity you're going to stop. Make sure the doctors are well aware of those ranges and, forewarn them beforehand when you have a problem. You don't want to walk into the operating room and say, hey, I just found out that the humidity is, at 70%. You want to give them fair warning before they even get to the surgery center if you see that you're having a problem with that. You also need to know who has the authority to cancel. Generally, I like to see the infection control person coordinator, to be part of that decision-making process. They're the ones that are, monitoring the equipment and especially the supplies. And then how are you monitoring and documenting those readings? I walked into a surgery center, Sue, a while ago where the humidity was at 5%. Now, I believe that's physically impossible. And we did find out that the monitor was malfunctioning, but the range was still very low.
Yeah.
And the frustrating part there is that this particular surgery center showed 30% all the time. In other words, it was very clear to me. Their logs were 30% all across the board. And I've been there a number of times. It was never the same number. So that's a real. So if as a surveyor I walk in and see no change in the percentages there, I know that document is being falsified. So make sure you know how you're going to be monitoring, how you're documenting, and have good logs there. Whenever you're outside of the ranges, make sure you document what you did. To either mitigate it or if you had to shut down. And what do you do with the sterile supplies that are sitting in a room that went out of the range? And again, you're going to have to look at your IFUs on that one. Sometimes you got to reprocess them. Sometimes you have to throw some of them out if they're items that you've purchased. Because if you're making that decision at 7 o'clock in the morning with a waiting room full of people, the pressure is to just go is going to be enormous, and you could have an infection control issue or other issues, obviously. Mm-hmm. And this ties right back to the regulations. It's a physical environment issue, it's an infection control issue, and it's also an emergency preparedness issue. And I wanted to point this out. Sometimes we forget about this. Your emergency plan is supposed to be built on an all hazards risk assessment. We call it the HVA, Hazard Vulnerability Analysis. And with this summer's that we've been having lately, losing your cooling in a heat wave is not a freak event anymore. So that belongs in your risk assessment. And I guess I point out, if it hasn't happened to you, you might want to do a drill. And if it has happened to you, document the drill document the event as an actual drill.
Yeah. So the next one is from Fierce Healthcare, and it's about the Leapfrog Group. A federal judge has ordered Leapfrog to remove its hospital safety grades for 5 Tenet hospitals in Florida. They're all part of the Palm Beach Health Network. The hospital sued them over a methodology change that Leapfrog made ahead of its fall 2024 grades, where Leapfrog began weighting what it calls imputed scores more heavily. Those are estimated stand-in scores that Leapfrog plugs in for some of its measures when a hospital hasn't submitted recent data. And the hospitals that chose not to submit their data ended up with Ds and Fs. The judge found that the approach had no scientific basis, that it unfairly penalized the hospitals that didn't participate, and that presenting those grades as an accurate representation of patient safety was deceptive and unfair under Florida law. He also found that Leapfrog's actions appeared to be intended to coerce hospitals into participating for Leapfrog's own financial benefit. Leapfrog's CEO, Leah Binder, said they will comply, but they plan to appeal.
Yeah. And, the line from the judge is what really jumped out at me, and I'm going to quote this one directly. She said, "It appears that the goal to maximize revenue came at the cost of comprehensive and accurate safety grades." And I can't believe they imputed, scores like that. I mean, it really is unbelievable. And we've talked about Leapfrog in the past because they've done ASC scores. So it's a remarkable thing for a federal judge to say about an organization that holds itself out as a patient safety watchdog.
Yeah.
Now, I think that a lot of our listeners are going to think right now, well, that's okay. That's the hospitals. That's not impacting us. But we really have to recognize that it is going to be landing straight in our laps again. Now, a lot of people in the ASC world think that the Leapfrog Group is only a hospital thing, and that the ASC side is a little bit of an offshoot because it really hadn't gotten a lot of traction. Leapfrog has been surveying ambulatory surgery centers actually since 2019, and I think we've been reporting since probably the early 2020s. And back in April of this year, they announced a major expansion of their ASC public reporting program. They're going to publicly rate close to 4,000 surgery centers in the country out of the about 6,500. And the first public reporting date is going to be this month, July 25th. That is 2 weeks from the day that you're listening to this. So if you've never given Leapfrog a single thought, you're about to have a public page out there with your center's name in it if you're one of those 4,500.
Yeah. So how does this all work?
So there's actually 3 pieces to it, which is somewhat new. So the first one is what I really want people to pay attention to. Yeah. Leapfrog is going to be scoring and public report 13 quality and safety measures that come out of our CMS ASC quality reporting program, which we talked about actually in the last episode too. And keep in mind, not everybody actually reports the program either because they're exempted from it because they do too few cases, or they just don't report it and they take the 2% penalty. So that's things, and let's just remind our listeners, I encourage you to go back to last episode to listen to this again. But the things that are included in the quality reporting program include unplanned hospital visits after a procedure, falls, wrong site surgery, wrong side surgery, wrong procedure, and they're going to do that for all applicable ASCs. You don't opt into that. So that data is going to be out there if you're reporting it or if you're participating in the program. And again, if it's sitting in the CMS information database. And they're going to report it, whether you ever talk to them or not. The second piece is 5 additional measures that get verified through your accreditation. Whatever your accreditation organization is. And that's things like documenting medications, using the safe surgery checklist, making sure your staff have the right certification, And what you're going to be doing is uploading proof of your accreditation to get credit for those. And then the third piece is the voluntary Leapfrog ASC survey. They're calling it, I think, Survey 2.0 now. And that covers things like patient rights and ethics, never events, health equity, and hand hygiene. And I should note that the health equity scores were removed from the ASCQR. So many of our surgery centers don't find that really applicable to ambulatory surgery centers. So keep that in mind. Now, the survey is free, and they have revised it and shortened it, though. I was talking to Bill Prentice over at ASCA, and I think he was saying in a session recently, they revised it, so now it only takes a day to prepare it. And I think everybody in the audience kind of laughed. It might have actually been more than that. And I just don't see the average surgery center taking 8 hours to fill out a survey like this when they have so many other things going on.
Yeah, we have heard a lot of centers complain that it is a big job, and it really doesn't fit with an ASC.
Yeah, and the last one, interesting, Sue, I can't remember how long ago it was that we reported this, but our comment was that it seemed like it was trying to make ASCs look bad at the expense of the hospitals, and there is this perception that it's hospital-centric, though, this recent lawsuit would appear to perhaps not quite substantiate that. But I think my feeling right now is that you really should not participate in a Leapfrog survey, and then just let it be, but make sure your data is accurate, that's been reported out there. The last participation was very tiny, and the criticism that was coming out of the survey was pretty blunt. The expert panel that put that survey together back, I think it was around 2019, 2020, somewhere around there. The group that put it together were all academics. From major academic centers. There was nobody on that panel with an ASC title. And the administrators who did participate said the questions were, and I'm quoting here, incredibly acute care centered. One administrator actually called the whole thing disheartening, and she pointed out that Leapfrog was scoring surgery centers on things like antimicrobial stewardship programs, when the Joint Commission itself has said that those requirements really don't apply to an ASC. Yeah. And at the time, Bill Prentice over at ASCA made what I think is the strongest argument at all, which is that the thing measures processes and not outcomes. And at the time, some of the state associations actually told their members to sit the survey out, or at the very least go talk to their board and their attorney before they participated. So no, historically, this has not been an ASC-friendly instrument. Now, to be fair, to Leapfrog, Survey 2.0 is shorter, and they have put ASC people on their advisory committee now. But I still really am, personally, I'm not going to recommend to any of our clients to participate.
So here's a concern, though. Are they going to do to surgery centers what they did to those hospitals? Are you going to get a bad score if you don't participate?
Yeah, that's exactly the right question I think we should be asking. Yeah. And as best as I can tell right now from reading this literature or reading the information, the answer is no. Not by the same mechanism anyway. Then the distinction really does matter here. What Leapfrog got into trouble with was the hospital safety grade, and that's a letter grade, the A through F. And they assign that grade whether you participate or not, and they fill in the blanks with those imputed scores that you mentioned earlier, Sue. There is no ASC letter grade. There's no imputation like that on the ASC side. So if you don't submit the voluntary survey, you get flagged as declined to respond. And if you don't have data in the CMS catalog for a measure, you show up as not available. And, I find the timing of this very interesting. Back in April, Leapfrog quietly removed declined to report category from the ASC scoring and replaced it with not available. I'm not going to speculate on why they did that, but the effect of it is that a surgery center that doesn't participate is not going to get an invented bad score. And this is the part I really want people to hear if you're still going to be on there. Whether you engage with Leapfrog or you completely ignore them, on July 25th, there's going to be a public searchable page comparing your surgery center to the one across town, and it's scored on your CMS quality data. So here's what I would try to do over the next 2 weeks. Go pull your CMS ASC quality reporting data and make sure that it was accurate, because that's what they're going to score you on, whether you lift a finger or not. And if it's wrong, fix it at the source. If you want those 5 accreditation measures to show up, then do upload your proof of accreditation to Leapfrog and make a deliberate decision about the voluntary survey. Talk to your board, talk to your leadership, decide on purpose instead of by default. And then after July 25th, go look it up yourself so that you know, and especially if a reporter shows up and asks you questions about it. Don't let that be the first time you see your Leapfrog page, the day somebody calls you.
So moving on, we also had some notable drug recalls this spring that are worth mentioning, and those all come off of the FDA's drug recall page. And we'll link those in the show notes. So there was a recall of eye drops used for pain and inflammation after cataract surgery, and that was for failed impurity and degradation specifications. There was a recall of more than 3 million bottles of artificial tears over sterility concerns, and there were recalls of prazosin and tramadol for nitrosamine impurities above the FDA's limits.
Yeah, and none of those are unique to surgery centers, but every single one of them is a test of whether your recall process actually works. So can you quickly figure out whether you have the effective lots? Can you pull them? Can you quarantine them? And can you document exactly what you did? Because that's what I'm going to look at as a surveyor. When we walk in, I'm going to look for your recall policy, number one, and then we're going to look to see exactly what you do and look to see that there's some documentation, usually handwritten, by the way, unless you have a computer system handle that. And by the way, that's a good lead into our focus segment when we get to part 2.
And I just have one more, and this one just became a hard deadline. The updated Section 504 rules, that's 45 CFR Part 84, took effect for healthcare providers on July 8th, and AAHC has been pushing its members to act on it.
Yeah, this one reaches a lot further than people expect, and it's been out there for a while. It's part of the Disability Civil Rights Rule, and it's a big one now for surgery centers that you cannot lean on a blanket cutoff. We've done this for a long time, so that hard BMI limit or the flat comorbidity rule that we have to turn a patient away could be problematic moving forward. You have to make an individualized determination. So the practical fix here is to go back through your pre-op screening criteria and replace any automatic cutoff with a documented case-by-case process. And then there's the equipment piece to it also, which has been getting quite a bit of notice in some of the back and forth on ASCA Connect, I believe. Accessible exam tables, accessible scales, lifts for patients with disabilities, and you don't treat this as a box that you check the week before the survey. Pull your admission and your pre-op policies now and document how you're going to make in those individualized calls. And it's going to put a lot of pressure, I think, on our doctors now, to have to make those. How they love their check boxes. Now they're not going to be able to fall back on those standardized policies. So, Sue, that's a lot of news this week. Interesting. We don't always have exciting stuff like that. And I think we did go a little bit long on some of our explanations, but hopefully it helped everybody. So let's take a short break. And when we come back, we'll talk about pharmacy management and recalls.
Every ASC professional knows that running a surgery center takes knowledge, skill, and a strong support network. That's why we created ASC-Central.com, a place where ASC leaders and staff can learn, connect, and grow together. ASC Central is a comprehensive hub for education and professional development in the ambulatory surgery industry. Our leadership boot camps, on-demand conferences, and membership programs are designed to meet the needs of administrators, nursing leaders, medical directors, business office managers, and anyone committed to excellence in outpatient surgery. Our leadership boot camps are guided, mentored programs that help develop the next generation of ASC leaders. Whether you're new to your role or looking to refine your skills, these boot camps provide the structure and insight you need. And many of them offer AEU credits for CASC certified administrators and IPCH credits for CAIP certified professionals, supporting your ongoing professional certification. ASC Central's on-demand educational library gives you access to in-depth programs on compliance, quality improvement, infection control, credentialing, finance, and more. These full-length virtual conferences are designed to be both informative and engaging, not just check-the-box webinars. Many also include CASC and CAIP continuing education credits. For those who want ongoing learning and connection, ASC Central offers flexible membership programs. The patron membership gives you access to Zoom discussions, key conferences, and a robust resource library. The Premium Access membership adds full access to all boot camps, private consultations, staff training, exclusive content, and ongoing support from top experts in the ASC field.
If you want to be part of a community dedicated to raising the bar in ambulatory surgery, visit asc-central.com or email us at info@ascpodcast.com. ASC Central, bringing ASC professionals together to learn, grow, and thrive.
So in our focus segment today, we're going to talk about pharmacy management and recalls. John, where do you want to start with this?
So we're going to start where the surveyors always start, and what we always try to start when we're talking about regulations in our focus segment, which is with the condition for coverage. And this is related to 416.48, pharmaceutical services. And I want to read it exactly the way it's written because the language really does matter. And it says this: the ASC must provide drugs and biologicals in a safe and effective manner in accordance with accepted professional practice and under the direction of an individual designated responsible for pharmaceutical services. And that's the end of the quote. And that's the whole condition. It's one sentence, but there's an awful lot packed into it.
There is. So what does CMS actually expect behind that language?
So in plain terms, the interpreted guidelines say that you have to designate a specific licensed healthcare individual to direct your pharmaceutical services. Now, some people think that that has to be your consultant pharmacist, but the consultant pharmacist is generally not there except maybe, 4 times a year. So they really can't be that individual. It's most likely going to be one of your physicians. And depending upon their structure of the organization, for example, if one of your physicians is designated as the person who is on the 222 form for purchasing all of your drugs, that person is most likely going to be director of pharmaceutical services. This is something I actually run into quite a bit during surveys where people have forgotten to or they haven't recently appointed this individual. And again, please make sure you understand that this is not something that your consultant pharmacist is going to be doing. So then the condition breaks into the standards, and the first one is 416.48a, administration of drugs. And that's a short rule also. It says, drugs must be prepared and administered according to established policies and acceptable standards of practice. And, notice what that's doing. It's pointing at 2 different things, your policies and the professional standard of practice. And you have to meet both of them. Now, the practical pieces of that is that every drug and every biological that gets administered in your center needs a physician order. And it has to be given by or under the supervision of nursing or other personnel who are actually permitted to do that under the state law and and in accordance with approved medical staff policies.
Okay, so let's stay on orders for a minute because I know that's where a lot of the centers get into trouble. Let's talk a little more about that.
Yeah, and it's actually been more of a recent problem, and I know, Sue, you and I have been running into this with some of our clients too, and it's worth being precise about it. So every drug and biological that is given in your surgery center has to have a physician order, and that order has to be complete and it has to be done before the drug's actually administered. Let's talk about what I mean by complete. It has to have the dose, the route, the frequency, and if it's a PRN order and as needed medication, so it has to have the indication. So, Zofran PRN is not an order. Zofran 4 milligrams IV every 6 hours is needed for nausea. That's an order. Mm-hmm. And then that order has to be authenticated. It's got to be signed, it's got to be dated, and it's got to be timed by the practitioner. And Sue, I've been noticing recently some of these computer systems that do this for you, the timing is not right. I believe there's an issue that we've encountered recently where orders will get dated or retimed whenever the physician adjusts anything in the schedule on the computer system. I'm not going to mention the names of those computer systems that do that, but you do want to be on top of that just to make sure that you're not confusing surveys. I've had to adjust the way I survey sometimes by really going deep and asking, why is the time of this pre-op order 10 hours after the surgery was completed? Yeah.
And what about standing orders and protocols? A lot of centers rely on those.
And I don't think everybody quite understands how those have to be treated. So, and they're perfectly legitimate, but they have to be set up correctly. Mm-hmm. So a standing order or a pre-printed order set have to be reviewed and approved by your medical staff. And it has to be adopted through your governing body, and it has to be set up so that it's reviewed periodically. It's not something that the director of nursing writes up on her own and drops into a binder. And here's the piece that the surveyors are looking for. The standing order still has to be applied to that individual patient by somebody who is authorized to do it, and that has to be documented. You can't just say, well, Well, we have a protocol or a standing order and then skip the whole patient-specific order. And then with regard to verbal and telephone orders, this is actually addressed in 416.48A3. The rule says, orders given orally for drugs and biologicals must be followed by a written order and signed by the prescribing physician. So build a read back into your process, including your policies. Read it back to the prescriber, document that you did it, and then make sure that the order actually gets signed inside your own time frame. Because unsigned verbal orders sitting in charts is one of the easiest citations that I, as a surveyor, is ever going to write.
And controlled substances are always a survey focus.
Yeah, those are the ones we really keep a very close eye on. So if you stock any Schedule 2 through 5 drugs, you need records of receipt and disposition that are current and accurate. And you need to have a system that traces every scheduled drugs from the moment it comes in the door to the moment it is actually given to the patient, or ultimately wasted if that's what happens. And the waste is where centers often get in trouble. You need that second signature there. You need to have your counts to reconcile, and you need to have it done on time, not reconstructed later. And this is, again, whenever those counts are off, don't just go home and then come back the next day. Yeah. You've really got to have it in your process that you keep working at it until you identify what the problem was.
Yeah. And what about adverse reactions?
So that moves on to 416.48A1. Sorry about all these numbers, everyone, but I'm assuming everybody that's listening to us has a copy of their conditions for coverage right in front of them.
Well, memorized.
Yeah, memorized. Yeah. So any adverse drug reaction that a patient has while they are in the center has to be reported promptly to the physician who's responsible for that patient, and it has to be documented in the record, and it should be feeding into your quality improvement program, your QAPI program, because that's where this is another one of those quality signals.
Okay, and let's get to the recalls since it's right in the title today.
Absolutely. And before I get into this, I do want to point out something that I didn't write into our notes here, and that is, don't forget, recalls are not just drugs. We're going to talk about drugs now, but the food products you use, the supplies you use, any of those things could also have a recall, and we're going to be looking for that as a surveyor. But let's just only talk today about recalls. And on the accreditation side, there's a lot more specificity there. So, for example, in AAHC's Med.220 standard, and again, this is only going to make sense if you're AAHC accredited, but Med.220 standard, which is, again, very, very common and very similar to other standards and other accreditation organizations. It states that you have to have a written policy for disposing of or returning expired, damaged, contaminated, or recalled drugs. And I do want to, again, point out that having the policy is not the same thing as having a process that works. So when a recall comes out, can you actually determine quickly whether you have the effective lots? Can you pull them? Can you quarantine them? Can you document what you did? Because that's the question that you're going to get. And I think we talked about that earlier in our news segment too.
Mm-hmm. So let's hit some of the common real-world issues that you're seeing.
So let's start with the storage and security. Medications have to be locked unless they are under the constant supervision of a licensed provider, and that includes your anesthesia cart. The classic finding out there is the anesthesia cart sitting unlocked between cases. I mean, I'd say 50% of the time that's what I find there, and that really is an issue. So, and if you've got pre-drawn syringes sitting on top of that cart between patients, that can actually turn into an immediate jeopardy conversation very quickly. And I've seen it and I've done it. And then there's the one I want to spend a minute on because the consequences are catastrophic, and that's succinylcholine and malignant hypothermia. Succinylcholine is a known malignant hypothermia trigger. So if you stock it, the surveyors expect you to have the means to treat MH. That's going to be your dantrolene or the alternatives out there in the right quantity. Your MH cart, your protocol, your staff training, all of it. And it does not matter what else you are using. It doesn't matter that succinylcholine isn't your primary agent. It doesn't matter that you've never used it. If it's in the building, you have to be able to treat MH. And I'll tell you, as a surveyor, this is absolutely an immediate jeopardy, and I have written it up. And I guess another point I'll make, and I've mentioned this to a couple of people before, sometimes I'm sneaky when I'm on a survey, Sue, and I'll go up to the anesthesiologist and ask them, I know that they, according to the records, they don't have any succinylcholine. I'll say, oh, by the way, can I see your succinylcholine? And,
sure.
It's happened a couple of times where they pulled out this bottle and suddenly got themselves into trouble. So I don't know that all surveyors are as sneaky as I can be sometimes on that, but that's one way to find out. And I get it. I do understand the anesthesiologist wanting to have that security blanket there. But it's got to be part of your protocol. It's got to be on your formulary. Everybody in the surgery center needs to know that you have it in your pocket, et cetera.
And where else are surveyors citing centers on pharmacy right now?
So let me just run through some of the ones that we see over and over again. Expired medications, still one of the most common findings that we find in it. And it, of course, is completely preventable. I know nurses don't have a lot of downtime anymore, if they ever did. But during that downtime, they really need to be double checking that, making sure that they label those that are about to expire so that it's easy to pull them. So you got to check every vial, every drawer, every card, at least every month. And any unsecured medications, which we already talked about. Single-dose vials being used for more than one patient, a big no-no, of course. Multi-dose vials with no open date or no beyond use date. And remember the 28-day rule there. Unlabeled syringes, I can't believe I still see these. Medications drawn up way in advance of the case, and especially if they're drawn up and left in a room between patients, so it was drawn up for a previous patient. That's a cross-contamination issue. Controlled substances with gaps in the records, so no second signature on the waste. Or I've actually seen people that have pre-signed the waste or the reconciliations. And again, that's not going to go over very well if the surveyor looks at it. Missing or incomplete physician orders, as we talked about earlier, verbal orders that never get signed. No look-alike, sound-alike lists or confused drug names is now the common term. No high-alert medication list, or you're using the standard list provided by ISMP instead of one that specifically identifies those drugs that you have. Those are two separate requirements, by the way, and people conflate them all the time. Refrigerator and medication room temperature logs with holes in them, emergency and crash cart medications that aren't being checked on schedule, and then, as we talked about earlier, the recall process that exists on paper but that nobody has actually run. If you look at the whole list, almost none of it is clinical judgment. It's discipline and it's documentation. Mm-hmm. And I actually think that's good news because it means that every one of those things is very easily fixable.
Yeah, and like we always say, you don't have to figure this out alone.
No, and this is a real plug here for our friends, the consultant pharmacists. So some states require you to have one, and a lot of states, unfortunately, don't. And I say that, just because I really have a lot of respect for them. And in those states that don't, centers will very often skip it to save a little bit of money, and I think that really is a mistake. A good consultant pharmacist is a second set of professional eyes on your medication program. And they're just a fantastic resource for you. They know the drugs, they know the storage rules and the beyond use rules cold, and they know what the accreditors are also looking for because I talk to them all the time. And they're going to catch the things that turn into citations long before a surveyor ever walks through your door. They'll help you out build your high alert list. They'll tighten up your diversion controls. They'll review your formulary, make sure it's accurate and up to date. And maybe the most valuable thing of all, they'll educate your nursing staff on the way things actually should be done, because it's coming from a pharmacist and not from me or somebody else in your organization. And I'll tell you, as a surveyor, when something goes wrong with a medication in a center, one of the first questions I'm going to ask is, well, what did your pharmacy consultant say about it? And if the answer is, well, we don't have one, it tells me an awful lot about your organization.
Yeah. So our listeners are going to hear a lot more about pharmacy this next week. Yeah,
they are. I'm looking forward to it. I recorded an interview during the Arizona Association meeting. I think it's scheduled for episode 285, Sue. I'm going to sit down with our two pharmacy consultants that I work with quite a bit, Amit Gupta and John Karwalski. And we're going to get into pharmacy issues that they're seeing in surgery centers right now. And, we talk about what's changing the fastest. We talk about a couple of the real world situations that sometimes are going to make you wince. And then we get into at least one where the wrong answer is a straight immediate jeopardy. So it's a great companion to what we've been covering today. So make sure that you catch it.
All right, let's take a short break. And when we come back, we will have a very quick list of upcoming events in the ASC industry. In this segment, we provide an update on upcoming topics for the podcast, our upcoming virtual conferences, and upcoming speaking engagements for John and his staff and other events in the ASC industry.
So coming up on the podcast, episode 284 is going to be this week, and it's going to be a special episode recorded live at the Colorado Ambulatory Surgery Association's conference, which I'm heading to in Golden, as we mentioned it earlier. And then next weekend, about July 18th, is going to be episode 285. We just talked about it, which is going to be my interview with some pharmacy consultants.
And the Colorado ASC Association's annual education conference and trade show is July 16th and 17th at the Denver Marriott West in Golden, Colorado, and that's the one you're heading right off to.
Absolutely. Can't wait to be there. It's a great agenda and get to meet all my friends there. And, of course, I was just there last week.
Yes.
So, and the Florida Society of Ambulatory Surgical Centers annual conference and trade show is going to be July 22nd through the 24th, and that's going to be at the Hyatt Regency Grand Cypress in Orlando, Florida.
The Georgia Society of ASCs summer meeting is August 20th and 21st at Hotel Emmeline in Charleston, South Carolina. And
the Illinois ASC Association's conference is going to be August 20th through the 21st at the Renaissance Schaumburg Convention Center Hotel in Schaumburg, Illinois, and I'll be there also.
The Texas ASC Society's annual conference is August 26th through the 28th at the Margaritaville Lake Resort in Lake Conroe.
And I actually just talked to the Texas Association. I'm going to be speaking there. I'm going to be moderating a session with accreditation organizations. And it sounds like we're going to have a special episode there, probably with a couple podcasters, Sue. So more to come on that. I don't have any more details yet. And the California Ambulatory Surgery Association, the CASA annual conference and exhibits is going to be September 2nd through the 4th in one of my favorite places, Monterey, California. So we'll be there recording a special episode also.
And the Pennsylvania Ambulatory Surgery Association's annual meeting and education conference is October 4th and 5th at the Eden Resort in Lancaster, Pennsylvania.
More to come on that. We think we're going to be there, but I don't think we've actually been able to nail that down yet. And the Atlantic States ASC Conference, which is the North Carolina, South Carolina, and Virginia Associations, conference is going to be October 8th through the 9th at the Embassy Suites at the Raleigh-Durham Research Triangle in Cary, North Carolina.
And the Oregon ASC Association's annual conference and trade show is October 15th and 16th at the Holiday Inn Portland in Wilsonville, Oregon. October is going to be a busy month, isn't it? And I'll be at the Oregon Association also. And again, we'll be recording a special episode. And the New England ASC Conference is October 23rd at the Hilton Boston Dedham in Dedham, Massachusetts. And I believe we're going to be there. I'm not sure if I'm going to be there or if some of my staff are going to be there, but that's a great conference always. And the Ohio Association of ASC's annual education conference is November 11th and 12th at the Ohioan Hotel and Event Center in Lewis Center, Ohio. And Lori Rodericks is going to be covering for me again this year. Unfortunately, that's the same time the Washington annual conference is. So we won't have a special episode from there, but you will be able to hear some of our employees speak there. Then the Washington Annual Education Conference and Trade Show is going to be the same time, November 11th through the 13th at the Tulalip Resort and Spa in Tulalip, Washington. And I'll be doing at least one session, and I'll also be doing a special episode from there. And the New York State Association of Ambulatory Surgery Centers annual conference is going to be November 17th through the 18th at the Desmond in Albany, New York. And by the way, they've moved this to quite a bit later in the year. So just a note on that. That's one of those conferences that we've always had a heavy presence at, and expect the same thing this year. And as we wrap up, remember that the podcast is just one part of what we do for ASC leaders. Through our family of brands, the ASC Podcast with John Goehle, ASC Central, and Ambulatory Healthcare Strategies, we provide the education, resources, and support that you need to thrive in this very complex industry. And if you'd like help running your center, our patron membership is a great place to start. Regular live Zoom sessions with our team and fellow members, a growing library of sample policies, procedures, forms, and fire and disaster drill kits, and several of our virtual conferences at no extra charge. And when you're ready for everything, our Premium Access program adds unlimited access to all of our boot camps and education programs, the weekly drop-in Zoom sessions, and one-on-one counseling time with our experts. For more information, you can sign up for any of these programs at ASC-central.com. And just remember that your membership directly supports the work that goes into this podcast. And thank you for joining us on this episode of the ASC Podcast with John Goehle. We hope you found the discussion valuable. If you did, please share it with your colleagues and be sure to subscribe so you never miss an episode. We genuinely appreciate your feedback and topic suggestions. Please feel free to reach out anytime at comments@ascpodcast.com.
And a heartfelt thank you to our outstanding team here. It seems to grow every day, Sue, doesn't it? And their dedication really makes this podcast possible. Our sound editor, of course, is you, Sue. Executive producer is myself, John Goehle, and our research team, which includes Sue Cronkite, Jenna Alvarez, Christina Norman, Judy D'Ambrosio, Mike D'Ambrosio, Zach Calritis, Jim Masters, Stuart Rosenberg, Amy Cronkite, Lori Rodericks, Kathy Foti, Donna Macchio, Kelly Frankenfield, and Tony Lyons.
Our theme music is by Media Sushi and Mike Noah. The ASC Podcast with John Goehle is hosted on Podbean and is available on all major podcast platforms. Thank you for listening, and we'll see you in the next episode. This episode of the ASC Podcast with John Goehle is sponsored by Surgical Information Systems, RFX Solutions, MedServ, and Ambulatory Healthcare Strategies. Surgical Information Systems provides cutting-edge information solutions for surgery providers. RFX Solutions is your all-in-one healthcare regulatory compliance software. MedServ, which offers the only digital narcotics cabinet specifically designed and priced for surgery centers, helping develop standardized processes and compliance, eliminate paper logs, and prevent drug diversion. And Ambulatory Healthcare Strategies is the nation's leading regulatory and accreditation compliance resource for ambulatory surgery centers. For more information about our sponsors, visit our website at ascpodcast.com. This podcast is an educational and operational tool and is not intended to be a comprehensive resource for all rules, regulations, and standards that an ambulatory surgery center must meet. The advice provided should not be considered as, nor does it constitute legal advice or opinion. When reviewing specific situations involving legal and regulatory issues, attorneys and other professionals should be consulted. This has been a production of Eden Group Development. All rights are reserved. If you're interested in advertising or sponsoring the ASC Podcast with John Goehle, please email us at info@ascpodcast.com. We would love to hear your questions and comments. Please email us at comments@ascpodcast.com.